Welcome to the webinar, Building a Forever Transaction with Every Customer, with Robbie, Kellman, Baxter, and hosted by Mize. I am Michael Blumberg, Chief Marketing Officer at Mize, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. This webinar includes a discussion on subscription business model industry trends and the Forever Customer by Robbie, Kellman, Baxter, founder of Peninsula Strategies, LLC. And enabling manufacturers to maximize customer lifetime value by Asha Kartham, founder and CEO at Mize. First, I want to give you a little bit of background about trends in subscription model industry. For many of us who have been in industry for quite some time, and particularly in manufacturing or dealer distribution businesses, we might think of some subscription business models as nothing new. Many of us are familiar with things like service contracts, leasing programs, and managed services. Those are all forms of subscription services. So what's different? What's new? Well, one of the things that's new about the increased interest on subscription models is that durable equipment manufacturers and their stakeholders, such as dealers and distributors, are realizing they could generate a greater share of their income from subscription model businesses and recurring revenue streams. So subscription models provide a company with a recurring revenue stream. There is also recognition among these stakeholders that subscription business models create enormous value to both the suppliers of those subscription models, like the manufacturers, and the stakeholders, as well as to the customers. So there's value to the customer of a subscription model, and there's also value to the company providing it, because they can build a tighter, more intimate relationship with their customers and achieve an ongoing revenue stream and get more intelligence, data, and knowledge to better serve those customers. The last major factor that I think is leading to increased interest and demand for subscription services is that manufacturers are willing to think beyond the product when it comes to the design of the service model. So they're incorporating additional elements besides just simply the product or the maintenance of the product. They're providing data and analytics and additional support to help the user of that product improve their experience and get better value from the use, and also contribute better value to the company that's using it. There are also a number of trends that are making it possible for this growth of subscription model business. One is the emergence of new consumer businesses. So consumers are aware of services like Netflix and Amazon Prime and other type of services where a box is delivered to the consumer's home each month containing goodies. Those are subscription businesses, and because of that, companies in the B2B space and other companies in B2C are starting to look at how can they build and scale and sustain a subscription business, because they're seeing that consumers want that to begin with. There's also a change in consumer preferences. If you think about it, less and less people in countries across the world really want to own anything. Less people are owning things. Instead, they're subscribing to it, or they're leasing it, or just paying for the use of it. So that's a trend we're seeing. Another trend we're seeing is this trend towards servitization, which is a trend that's been going on some time, which is adding additional services to the product itself. And as part of that, one of the ultimate outcomes of the servitization trend, or as many call it, the servitization journey, going from being a product-centric company to being a services company, is this idea of delivering anything as a service, where instead of buying the product outright, you're paying for its use. You're paying for the service, the right to use it. It's called product as a service, or anything as a service. And lastly, there are a number of technologies that are making this all possible. For example, we have now technology that makes it easier for us to collect data. That's in the form of analytics, cloud solutions, IoT sensors, as well as improved connectivity and computer processing power from this same type of technology. And lastly, there's a convergence of both software and hardware, where some products, it's hard to tell the difference. For example, Tesla, while you buy the car, you're getting your upgrades and enhancements through the software that's part of that automobile. So what we've learned from our research is that subscription businesses are really growing at a rapid rate. Over the past 7 years, subscription companies increased sales by more than 300%, representing a 18% combined annual growth rate over that time period. And that's growing at 5 times faster than the S&P and 5 times faster than the US retail sales. And that also equates to 10 times the sales growth of the DAX, which is the German stock exchange, and the ASX, which is the stock exchange in Australia. So these are, I think, all very compelling reasons why we need to be looking at subscription models and why that represents the future of commerce. And I want to, as far as the trends are concerned, I want to leave you with this quote. Subscriptions are a top growth drivers for companies today. The total value of the top 100 global brands coming from subscription-based business has doubled since 2009. And that's from Charles Prevail, who's the CEO of Interbrand. Now I'd like to introduce you to Robbie Kellman Baxter, the founder of Peninsula Strategies and a best-selling author. Robbie brings over 20 years of strategy consulting and marketing expertise, helping companies leverage subscription pricing, digital community, and freemium to build deeper relationships with customers. Robbie is a sought-after writer and keynote speaker and quoted on business issues in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and numerous other publications.
Great. Thanks so much for the nice background and the great introduction. I'm going to turn on my camera so that it feels a little bit like we're all in the same place. We're all connected. You know, we've been sheltering in place for the last several weeks, so it's sometimes nice to see who you're talking to. You know, before I get into the presentation, I want you to just look at these two words, forever and transaction. They're two words that we don't see together very often because we think of a transaction as one thing, and we think of forever as going on for obviously for a long time. And what I'm here to tell you is that it's possible to build a transaction with your customer which goes on forever. You do it once and it lasts for as long as your customers need the services that you're providing. And what I want to do today is give you some ideas and inspiration, as well as some specific tools to do that in your own businesses. So Michael already did a good job of sharing some background on kind of why subscription, but I want to just give you a sense of how pervasive subscriptions are right now. Subscriptions are changing how we shop. Rent the Runway, Birchbox, Amazon Prime. Right now, it's the only way we shop. It's changing. Subscriptions are changing how we watch TV. HBO now is about to launch. You know, HBO is about to launch HBO Max. There's Apple Plus. Disney Plus just announced 50 million subscribers in their first, I think it's their first 3 months of business. And I bet every person on this call probably subscribes to at least one of those as a way of watching TV. The subscription business model is changing how we eat. I don't know if any of you have a subscription to Burger King, but you can subscribe to Burger King's $5 unlimited coffee membership, which allows you to stop in every morning on your way to work. And you know, if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be talking about Burger King subscriptions, I never would have believed it. But it's really, you know, subscription models are changing how we eat. There's Blue Apron delivering meal kits, which has had a big spike in the last couple of months here in the U.S. You know, there's Kind Bar subscriptions. Snack Nation brings snacks every month or every week into the office. So it's really changing how we think about how we get our food. Subscriptions are changing how we play. We certainly have a lot of that in our house right now with electronic arts subscription. My son is playing all the time. Apple has a subscription. We have a Peloton bike in the garage since we can't get to the gym. Six Flags and other theme parks are all moving into year-round ongoing memberships that actually expand beyond just admission to the parks and really focus on the forever promise of creating family fun. Membership, not that we're doing a lot of traveling these days, but membership has really changed how we travel. You don't have to buy a car anymore. You can subscribe to Porsche, and Porsche Passport allows you to drive a Cayenne on Monday and enjoy a sports car on the weekend. You can also use Uber RidePass to manage surge pricing, and Surf Air for those of you who are doing a lot of travel in the far west. You can, bop from, Reno to Santa Barbara to other secondary smaller market airports on a private jet for a fixed price. And of course, what we're going to be talking about mostly today is that membership is really changing how we work. Some of the examples that I've been talking to and working with, Carbon 3D here in Northern California, where I live, has a new distributed manufacturing model where you subscribe to the 3D printers. The company does not own the printers, they subscribe. The printers are smart, and new software is constantly being sent out to all the printers to basically give you a new printer every couple of weeks. And then you can subscribe to the resins. Salesforce, of course, is the granddaddy of the as a service movement, the anything as a service movement with their software as a service model. Caterpillar, of course, has publicly said that they see a future where you don't buy the heavy equipment, you subscribe to it. And then, of course, LinkedIn has really, in a lot of ways, replaced professional associations and societies. LinkedIn is where we go to connect with colleagues, to network, to learn about what's new in our profession and more generally. So all of these examples are examples of what I call the membership economy. And, what I really want you to do as you're listening is think about whatever recurring revenue models you may have today, or whatever recurring revenue models you may be hoping to launch or scale. I want you to think of it in the context of a bigger movement, which is what I just showed you. All of these models, which really focus on putting your customer at the center of what you do and optimize an offering that continues to grow and evolve with that customer's needs on an ongoing, almost daily basis. If you continue to grow and evolve and solve the problem for your customer, that justifies the subscription pricing and builds, what I call a forever transaction. My first book was The Membership Economy, where I really was just trying to convince people that this was a trend. This was 5 years ago, and I was trying to say, look, membership is everywhere. I'd been working with Netflix. This is 2002. 2003, I was working with Netflix, and then I worked with a lot of different companies. I said, look, what Netflix is doing can be applied to everything. And you can build that kind of relationship by changing the metrics you use, by focusing on a forever promise, by being willing to continually tinker with your model to make it better every day. You can justify loyalty where your customers take off their consumer hat, put on a membership hat, stop looking for alternatives, and make you part of their regular habits. And that was 5 years ago, and people didn't really get it. That's why I wrote the book. It was a £1 business card to say, look, this is happening. Flash forward 5 years later, we're in a new world. Forever transaction, everybody understands it, everybody wants it. Every industry, every company, everybody's experimenting with subscriptions, services revenue. They're talking about servitization. They're talking about anything as a service. They're talking about memberships. They're talking about recurring revenue because, according to McKinsey, businesses that have recurring revenue, that have subscription revenue, enjoy valuations of 5 to 7x other similar companies that don't have subscription revenue. So everybody's doing it. And you can see that, these are the companies that I profiled in my books. Every single one of them has a membership model and subscription pricing. So just take that in for a second. It's everywhere. And if you're thinking about your subscription or you're thinking about your services component, it's good to remember that the person that you're talking to about this probably has somewhere between 15 and 20 things they're already subscribing to. So they're already pretty sophisticated about what a subscription should do for them and what it should mean for them. Now, we're truly in a new world. In the last 6 weeks, especially, I just want to, allude to the fact that we're talking in spring of 2020, when most of us are sheltering in place as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And things are very different. And there's bad news, tons and tons of bad news, actually. People are pulling back on what they're willing to spend. People are afraid. People are behaving in unpredictable ways. When you reach out to a prospect or a customer, you don't know what's on their mind. You don't know if they have they've just put a loved one into the hospital. You don't know if they might have lost their job, or their spouse lost their job. They might have their kids crawling all over the floor because they don't have childcare. They might be very worried about their income if they're a small business owner. So it's kind of a hard time to reach out, and it's also hard because even businesses that are relatively secure, that have a cushion, a nest egg, that have some assets, they're behaving in a really conservative way, although that's starting to change, I think. But it is a very hard time, and I want to acknowledge that. Now, the good news is that there has never been a better time for people to be willing to try new things. When there are times of stress and chaos, people have to change their habits. They have to normally, when you ask a customer, and I'm sure many of you have had this experience where you ask a customer, let's say, to do things in a different way, to move to digital, for example, to place an order or place a request for help digitally, they might say, well, that's not really how we do things, or I'm more comfortable talking live, or I'm more comfortable in person. Suddenly people are open to doing things a different way, and they're open to learning new paths. We see that certainly with the rise of online, virtual conferencing. I've been on, I've used Zoom for birthday celebrations, book clubs, a Shiva morning ceremony for a friend who lost her sister. I've been on it with my parents. I've been on it with children. So we're seeing new habits form. And so you have an opportunity right now to actually help your customers move to new habits. And teach them, kind of new ways of doing things. There's also a higher level of trust right now, because you're vulnerable, and you have to trust people to solve the problems that weren't solved elsewhere, or that you can't solve in your traditional ways. And then finally, the other piece of good news, I think, as Michael alluded to, we're living in an environment where everybody's doing subscriptions. So there's a lot of acceptance of subscription models from businesses and from consumers, especially if you compare it to even a few years ago. And there's a lot of supporting services to form the underpinnings of your subscription. So it's easier than ever to experiment with subscription offerings or the idea of digital community. At the heart of all this, as I said, is the forever promise. It's the reason that justifies loyalty from your customers. It might be, if it's a consumer, it might be, we're going to make sure that your kitchen is always modern and everything works great so that you can enjoy cooking and connecting with family and friends. Or it might be, if your members are ISPs, it might be, we're going to help you be successful in your business. We're going to help you take care of your customers, doing everything we can. That's the promise. And when you have that promise, then you can introduce products and services around the promise to continue to layer in value over time. I'm going to go through this model that I use with my clients when they're building and tinkering with their models to make them more member-centric. At the heart of it is product market fit, which requires that you know who your best members are. And you know them at a level where if you saw one, if you were at an event and you started talking to them, within 5 minutes, you'd say, this person would love our membership. They're the perfect person. They will get tremendous value. They will sign up, they will get value, and they will be happy to pay us. You need to know who your best member is at that level, at that visceral level. And then you need to design your services offering, your subscription offering, in a way that both has product market fit at the trigger, at the moment of initial transaction. So I always think about that as being, what are the headline benefits that get someone to sign up with you? But it also has to have what I think of as engagement benefits, which are the ones that make sure they're not going to cancel. So those are the benefits around that you would track by understanding recency, frequency, depth, and breadth of usage of your services. You want them to be on a regular cadence, using them frequently, using them not too long ago, and using all the products and services that they're paying for to get full value, which of course increases the likelihood of them staying. Once you have that product market fit and you're good with your product, you want to make sure everything else aligns. So you want to start with the organization, and you want to make sure that you have the right metrics, not just metrics for acquisition of new customers, not just revenue numbers, but you also want to have metrics around the stuff that happens in between, the engagement, and you also want to understand at an individual customer level, you want to understand the unit economics. So in other words, are you making money on each new customer because you know how long they're going to stay and you know what value they're going to drive for you through the subscription? I'll walk through these quickly. I'm happy to take questions on these. Okay, so in the funnel, you want to there we go. You want to start at the bottom of the funnel with retention. Make sure you're keeping your customers before you go out and put on your loudspeaker and start attracting new subscribers. You want to make sure that your subscription model works before you turn on your loudspeaker. That's kind of flipping the funnel. And the reason is that once someone joins, the revenue that you'll generate from them over the long term is so valuable that you want to make sure you optimize that part first, the forever part first, before you open the funnel for others. In terms of pricing, what I would say around subscriptions is you want to price it as simply as possible and no simpler. The more complex your pricing model, the less your customers trust you. The reason is that they have to become experts on your pricing model and really think hard about, do I want this feature or that feature, or this benefit or this add-on or that add-on? The more you make them do that, the less able they are to put on their member hat and just trust you to take care of them and solve that forever problem for them that you've promised you're going to do. I want to just make a nod to the concept of freemium and the concept of free trial. A free trial is a taste of something delicious that you give to a prospect because they don't understand what you're saying it is, what it tastes like. They don't know what it tastes like, or they don't believe it tastes as good as you say. Freemium, on the other hand, is giving prospects, something free forever. It's like if free trial is a taste of filet mignon, freemium is hamburger forever. And you use that only if you're trying to change behavior, get them used to doing things in a different way until they kind of hit a paywall and realize, oh, I'm using this more than I thought I would, so I'll upgrade to the paid version. Or if the customers are if the freemium customers are part of your product. So in other words, you have a network effect and each new customer brings value for the paying subscribers. Or if the people that are getting your product for free forever are actually a channel bringing in your paying subscribers. So they're the ones that are actually touching all of the people you really want to reach who are going to pay you. And so you use that as a channel to reach people. I want to spend a second talking about onboarding, especially right now. If you're bringing in new customers who are coming to you because of this moment of crisis, because you have solutions that they need in this moment, it's really important to onboard them the first seconds, minutes, or days after they've joined, so that they don't see this as an interim stopgap, but rather as a new normal for them, as a, like, I tried this because during the coronavirus, I had no other choice, but now it's my new normal and this is how I'm going to do things going forward. So like, as an example, my mom goes to the grocery store every single day, buys dinner for my dad and her. Since the coronavirus, she's been subscribing to a food delivery service, and she's like, this is great. Why did I ever go to the grocery store? And yet, if you'd asked her 3 months ago to try a delivery service, she would have said, no, I don't need that. That's not something for me. So they've actually won her over as a forever customer. Customer success is a concept that comes from the world of software as a service here in Silicon Valley, where I live. And it's the idea that instead of customer support, which is really about waiting until someone has a problem and complains, it's about proactively offering value. It's reaching out to the customer saying, hey, do you like what we're doing for you? I see that you're not using all the features that you're paying for, that you're entitled to. We want to make sure that you're really happy. We care about your success. And that's about a mindset shift. You don't necessarily need to call your support team customer success, although it can be helpful. Words matter and they change how people feel. But when you're thinking about building a long-term relationship with your customers and you want them to stay, you want to make sure they're successful, because if they're not, they're going to cancel. It's different than when they buy durable goods. It's like, you buy the product and then you're stuck with it, whether or not you ever use. If I buy a dishwasher and then I never use it because I'm not really comfortable and I don't really understand where to put the soap or how to use it, and the instructions are confusing to me, doesn't necessarily matter to the manufacturer because I already paid. But if I'm subscribing either to the dishwasher or to services to make sure that the dishwasher always works, if I'm not using the dishwasher, I'm not going to keep using the services. So it becomes more important to be proactive in the way you support your customers. And finally, in this membership economy, every company is a technology company. So, to some extent, you need to start thinking about how technology works in your organization to support your customers and to deliver on that forever promise. So at this point, I know I've thrown a lot at you, and I'm going to pause and we can take some questions.
Okay, yeah, Robbie, I have one question here. You wrote the membership economy book 5 years ago. What have you learned since then? What's different and what led you to write this new book?
Yeah, it's a good question, Michael. It's a totally new world right now. Everybody's doing subscription. When I wrote the book, subscription was mostly in the US, and it was mostly, digital, software as a service, digital content, and community. And today we're seeing subscription as a global phenomenon. Consumers around the world are comfortable with the model. Entrepreneurs around the world are introducing subscription offerings. And we're seeing subscription go into new industries: retail, consumer products, durable goods, heavy equipment, and not just as a wrapper. So you buy the product and there's services around it, but actually inside the product as, a smart product, or maybe even as access to the benefit of that product, as opposed to having the burden of ownership. So big difference.
Okay, thank you. Robbie, you also talked about starting with the bottom of the funnel. Does that mean testing it out with a select number of customers, or is it just simply figuring this out internally, using a whiteboard to whiteboard everything out and, think it through?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of the time, I come out of marketing and strategy, and most of the time people start at the top of the funnel. So you think about the funnel, and at the top, it's about awareness. So let's put on our loudspeaker and say, hey, everybody, we have a new product, come check it out. And then you see, hey, does anybody respond to our message? And what I'm suggesting is you start at the bottom of the funnel. So it's usually it's awareness, then they try it, then they do the transaction, then you're done, and you go back and you put on your loudspeaker again and you bring in more people. And what I'm suggesting you do is you start by making sure you understand what drives the transaction, and to make sure that after that moment of transaction, that person that signed up with you is going to stay for a long time. And only when you've mastered that do you start, building trial and then finally turning on your loudspeaker. So you might, to think about that in an organization, you might come up with a services offering, a membership model. You might have hypotheses like, if somebody buys our product and signs up for our services, they're going to generate this much more revenue because they're going to stay for 3 years. And then at the end of the 3 years, they're 50% more likely to buy from us again. Let's just say that that's your hypothesis. You want to start testing that hypothesis before you bring in more people. You want to spend your limited resources figuring out the model before you bring more people in. Otherwise, you run into the trouble of having, what I would call a leaky bucket, where people come in and they leave, and you end up losing money on each new customer, which is actually what happened with Blue Apron, the meal kit company. They had a lot of venture money. They were giving away free trials that were pretty expensive. Took 7 months of subscription to pay off the acquisition cost. They were only keeping their subscribers for 6 months. So you can do the math on that. They were losing money on every new subscriber. We don't want that.
No, we don't. We have one more question. Are activation fees a major barrier to entry for subscribers?
Yeah, it depends. This is a good question. So yes, activation fees are a barrier. They slow people down because they're like, whoa, I actually have to spend some real money. Even if the subscription is at a reasonable price, this activation fee, this onboarding setup fee, makes me think twice. So you have a couple of different options here. One of them is that you say, that's okay, because we don't want people to join if they're not ready to stay. And requiring them to kind of jump through this hoop, with this, writing a check in this case. Sometimes it's about the onboarding process actually requiring time and effort and setup. But whatever that is, once they go through that, they're likely to stay. And so you say, well, that actually creates a really clean model for us because they go through that process and then we know they're going to stay and we're going to have loyalty. So sometimes that's a model you want to build. Other times you want to incorporate it like into the first year. So you say, look, you pay this one fee for the first year and then it's monthly after that. That's a way of kind of smoothing out that big lumpy expense at the front. And if you don't have if you have variable costs associated with a new subscriber, you need an activation fee, or you need to really, really understand how long they're likely to stay. But until you know that, it's very dangerous to set them up for monthly and not charge them for that activation fee.
Okay. I'm sure what's on a lot of people's minds right now is they're probably being bombarded with lots of solicitations, emails from companies about how they can help them during this crisis. Many companies seem to portray that they might have an answer. They might have a solution to something.
I've never been so loved by by the companies that don't know who I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So at least the question is, how can someone foster and cement trust with customers during a crisis if everyone's doing this?
Yeah. So it's like any other time of communication. You want the communication to be personalized, and you want to offer something that's actually valuable. And this is kind of ethics 101, but you want to be a good partner. So I've gotten a million of these letters from different companies, and the ones that have stood out to me are the ones where they're obviously doing something that's painful for them but helpful for me. So they're giving me, especially when I'm already a longtime customer, when they're offering me value without charging me for it, or they're discounting their services because they know that I'm not getting value for them. So for example, if the gym is closed, I should not be charged. And some gyms are being really proactive about that, and other gyms are saying, let's close in March, but let's charge for April and see what happens for anybody who didn't come to us. So I think a lot of it is about how you behave. That I think so that's one thing. Second thing is personalization. So some of you maybe in mass market businesses, others may have kind of a limited number of really valuable customers. This is a time to call them and check in and to really listen. I mean, this is I was talking to product managers last night, and this is an opportunity to pivot a little bit and think about what value can we provide them right now. So for example, do a lot of work with newspapers, professional, newspapers for professionals, business, like the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, things like that. One of the things that some of them are doing is they're really focusing on what happens if you lose your job. How do you lay people off? How do you manage in a crisis? And they're offering those, they're offering new webinars, new products. They're offering hotlines where you can actually call experts and get advice. Those are things that you might introduce right now, a hotline for people to say, hey, I know you're struggling. Here are the issues. So step back. Know what the issues are that are facing your best customers. Think about whether there's something that you can provide to them right now with your expertise and your infrastructure, and then proactively reach out and offer it to them. If you can afford it, do things for free. But I think, as one client said, you wouldn't expect the baker to give away the bread. Why would you expect us to give away our products? So you don't have to give it away for free, but even just pivoting and offering new functionality, new services is a way of demonstrating commitment to the customer as opposed to just commitment to your own product and your own processes.
Okay, great. Well, we have many more questions. Why don't we continue and then we'll come back to Q&A towards the end.
Yeah, great. That's perfect. So I'm just going to go through and just share a couple of examples to get people's juices flowing. So here's some examples. In automotive, you can buy a car. You can lease a car. You can subscribe to Porsche and get access to their fleet of cars. It's pretty expensive, but if you want a variety of cars for different occasions, you can. You can subscribe to a single car through Volvo, where you have the one car. If there's any problem with it, they come pick it up. They give you a different one. It's very white glove. You don't have to handle maintenance, pay for maintenance, anything, and you just subscribe every month. And then you can subscribe to Uber Passport, and you can get a number of rides for a discount, and also get special benefits like picking your own drivers and not having any surge pricing, being protected from surge pricing. So all of those examples are about the same promise, which is I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you to get from here to there with or without your stuff, with or without other passengers. And what's happening right now in the world of automotive, and the reason I brought this up, is that there are a lot of different ways to package the value. For many, many years, there was pretty much just a couple of ways. You could buy the car, you could lease the car, you could go to a car rental service, you could take a taxi. And now there are these other ways to repackage value for people who say, I don't want to just have one kind of car, I want to have a variety of cars, or I don't want to have any responsibility for taking care of the car, but I want the car to be available to me, or Turo, which allows you to share your car, basically rent out your own car in kind of a sharing economy model with other people. So if my vacation car sits, at the beach, Monday through Friday, and you work in that area and you need a car Monday through Friday, you can use my car and pay me. So it's just breaking down the bundling and repackaging it in a way that better aligns with a particular segment of your audience. So I wanted to share that as an example of an industry that's kind of embraced it. And of course, the other interesting example is Tesla, which many people have described as software with metal wrapped around it, where instead of it depreciating the moment you drive it off the floor, it continues to learn and through software have new functionality, new features, and stay current. Okay, Rolls-Royce is an example many of you are familiar with. I had a couple of others in there. Rolls-Royce moving to this concept of power by the hour. And the idea there is that people don't want necessarily to pay for the engine and have the responsibilities that come with it. They want uptime, they want power. So can you rethink how to do that? I also had an example in there of Carbon 3D, but since I talked about that earlier, I'm going to just skip past it. And then Peloton, my favorite subscription currently. I was just on the bike this morning, where you buy the bike, but it's expensive. And even though it works just like any other stationary bike, if you're not going to use that awesome that awesome tablet that's attached to it with the streaming content and the catalog of rides, of classes, there's really no point in buying it. But if you do use the tablet device, you get a whole bunch of new benefits. You can be at home, but still be in community. You can have variety and inspiration, and you can even be recognized by the instructors who can give you a shout out. So that's the beginning of this new model, not just of offering services around the equipment, but actually integrating the service experience and the community into the product itself. So this is sold, I think probably most of you know, in a combination. It's about $2,400 to buy the bike, and then you're required, this was somebody's question about activation, you're required to pay for a year subscription to the streaming content at, I think it's $40 a month. After that, you're on your own. You don't have to subscribe, but why would you have a Peloton and not subscribe? Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is really the structure of my new book, The Forever Transaction. And, Michael had asked, what's different now? And, I just have so much data. I've been in the trenches with over 100 companies that are trying to build subscription models. And so what I did in this book is I share the principles and the frameworks that have helped them launch new businesses, whether they're entrepreneurs just starting out or they're intrapreneurs working inside an organization that has a different business model that is trying to incorporate these elements of the membership economy. And then I talk about how to scale a business and then how to maintain your leadership position in the long term. So the first phase, launch, is really about gathering resources, setting expectations with leadership and with your investors that it's going to take a while to figure this out and you're going to be continually tinkering. And also that, while transactional revenue, especially for those of you that sell durable goods, physical products, it's very lumpy, right? The customer doesn't buy and then they buy and then they don't buy. And this model is they buy a little bit for a long time and it stays right here. So it's going to take a while before you get to that spike amount. So you have to make sure that your colleagues and leadership and investors understand this model and that you appropriately set expectations. Once you have that, you want to figure out what your forever promise is. You want to figure out, of course, who you're making it for, who that promise is to, and then get that product market fit, not just for the initial transaction, but a justification for the long term. And by the way, the companies listed at the bottom, those are the companies that I featured in that section. So it's a little teaser. Next phase, once you've figured out your model and you're off in the corner, it's time to scale. And this is where you want to invest in infrastructure. This is where you want to find the right software solution. This is where you want to make sure that the culture of your organization is focused on the customer's long-term well-being and not on this product or that product or this quarter's number. Quarterly capitalism has killed many businesses. That short-term focus means that customers don't get taken care of necessarily, and in the long term they leave. This is also the phase where a lot of businesses that I've worked with start thinking about acquiring an outside business as a means of bringing in-house that expertise. And then the last phase is lead, and this is where businesses have been successful for a long time and they tend to age with their cohort. So this is where, for example, you might have a group of ISPs that have been with you for a long time and they love the way you do things, but tomorrow's providers are looking at your offering and they're maybe not taking it. And the reason for that, often, I'm not saying for anyone on this call, but I'll use a different example, news, which probably we all know. Most newspapers that have been successful and been around for a long time have an aging readership. And they used to think that they had an aging readership because young people didn't care about news or didn't like to read. But what they're finding out, and there's lots and lots of new publications coming out every day, they're finding out that it's not that young people don't like to read, it's that they don't find this publication relevant for them. It's the packaging, so print versus digital versus tweets. Maybe they don't like that. Maybe they're able to get it for free elsewhere, so it's no longer a differentiated model. But in a nutshell, what happens is that the new customers, the prospects, are looking out on the horizon. They're looking with their telescope to see all of the options that they have. And the company is with its microscope at its current members and whether they're happy with the current product. And as a result, there's a mismatch. The prospects see potential and the companies tend to get too focused on their current members. So what I would encourage there is not just looking at, today's members and optimizing for your members today, but listening to a whole chorus. Today's members, tomorrow's prospects, and yesterday's members who left, the people who left. And maybe even if you can get it, you want to really try to stay connected with people who considered your option and went with something else. Being curious, being like a detective, understanding why people don't choose your offering is tremendously helpful, as is understanding why people cancel. So if there's one thing, key idea, it's that subscriptions are a pricing tactic. It's a tool. It's not a strategy. You have to have a strategy that justifies the subscription pricing. What is that value you're providing, and how are you taking care of that customer that makes them confident that they want to trust you and pay you on a regular cadence in an automated way? The secret to the forever transaction, in a nutshell, everything I've just said, is to love your customers, and that can be your end users, that can be your ISPs, your intermediaries, but whoever it is, know who they are that you're really serving and love them and their goals, their mission, more than your own product or the way your people like to do things or the processes that you've always had in place. It's really about using that customer's need and their mission as your North Star. And it's never been more important than right now, when we're slogging our way through this uncharted territory, to use that as the North Star to guide us through this uncharted territory. Okay, so I have some goodies for you. If you go to robbiekellmanbaxter.com/audience, there's some slides and the membership manifesto, and a chapter you can share with your colleagues, although I know you're getting the book, which is awesome. And feel free to link in with me, and we will go into questions now.
Okay, great. Robbie, thank you. I have a couple questions here that have come through. One of the questions is, for every 10 entries into the subscription economy, what is the success rate?
Oh, well, it is the Wild West right now in subscriptions, so that number is low. But I would also say that it depends. So for example, subscription boxes, this idea that you can curate, whatever, a box of makeup or a box of energy bars or a box of cigars, and that, people will subscribe. That model is very difficult because most people don't need that much discovery. 3 months of new products, and I'm like, okay, I've got some new favorites. I don't need more inspiration at this point. Also, a lot of the businesses that are coming out don't have good fundamentals. So they, for example, the price isn't right. It's too high, and that's because the company, the startup, doesn't have economies of scale, doesn't have supply chain efficiencies, and so they end up having to charge a premium relative to other places people can buy the same thing. In this world, though, in the world of kind of successful existing manufacturers and other kinds of going concern businesses, there's a greater success rate. But what I'm trying to think, I don't know if I have a number of what that percentage is, but I will say that the ones who fail, I was going to say the ones who succeed, but it's probably more interesting to hear about the failures. The ones who fail don't have leadership support that gets them through that early iteration phase. I have a lot of companies that I've talked to that tell me, oh yeah, we tried subscription. We tried it once 3 years ago and it didn't work. And then they tell you what the offer is, and you say, well, that's a terrible offer. That's why it didn't work, not because it's not a good model. And so that's one issue, is you're not having the support, not having product market fit when you launch, not being willing to iterate. Those are usually the reasons that it doesn't work. But of the companies that I've worked with, most businesses figure this out and are successful. And they can be successful in two ways. Using membership and subscription as a marketing tool, as a way of kind of bringing people to you and keeping them consistently engaged with you so that they buy those, make those lumpy transactions on a regular basis with you as opposed to with other people, or where the subscription itself is the new business model, where instead of selling something periodically, you're actually offering subscription access to the same benefit. And I'm seeing, an increasing amount of sophistication and companies that are really thriving in this space. I would say 7 out of 10.
Oh, good. That's encouraging. So we'll do one more question, and then we'll pick it up at the end after Ashok finishes his presentation. So Robbie, the next question is, what are key metrics a subscription model should focus on to manage the health of the business?
Okay, so the gold standard for measurement is lifetime customer value, which is, how much money do we make from this particular customer over time? Most companies don't track that because it's hard to track, but that is the gold standard. There are a bunch of leading indicators. You want to have a balanced dashboard for your subscription. So of course you want to track acquisition, are new people coming in? That really tells you if your headline benefit has product market fit, if what you're promising is something that people want. So you want to track that and make sure that people are finding, and that the people that you want are coming. And then you want to track for your internal use, you want to track engagement metrics, which are recency, frequency, depth, and breadth of usage. So recency, when was the last time that they connected with us? Frequency, how often did they connect with us? Depth, when they connect with us, how much time, how much engagement are we getting from them? And breadth is, are they aware of and taking advantage of all of our benefits, or are they kind of narrowly focused on just one, kind of thinking of us as a point solution when we see ourselves as a full solution? So those are the best ones. I think from an investor perspective, your investors are going to want to see revenue. They're going to want to see monthly active users. They're going to want to see ARR, annual recurring revenue. They're going to want to see monthly recurring revenue. They're going to want to see your churn month over month. That's the the retention metric. Are they staying? You also I'm giving you a lot of different ideas. You also probably want to start tracking by cohort. So, how long does the average customer stay? How many months? And then how does that vary based on the source of that subscriber? So, where they came from, how they found out about you. How does it vary by time of year when they sign up? So, for example, QuickBooks, Intuit's product for taxes, or no, not QuickBooks, TurboTax. It's very seasonal. People sign up around tax time. But it's, QuickBooks has a subscription that goes all year round, but they find that, more people join around tax time and then cancel. And people who join in, let's say, July are more likely to stay longer. You also can see the result of different campaigns that way, but tracking that and then understanding how are people staying longer on the whole. So, people who join are staying for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 27 months. You want to really start to understand churn and understand the reasons for churn. And as I said earlier, you want to become a detective and get really curious about why people leave. Most people, if you ask them why they leave, they either say, oh, I wasn't using it even though it's so great, or they say, oh, I couldn't afford it because things are hard and I don't have any money. And neither one of those reasons is ever the real reason, because most people have money. They just are choosing not to spend it with you because they don't see value. And the reason they're not using your product is not because they're so lazy. It's because they don't see enough value to justify the effort. So those would be things that I would be tracking.
Robbie, thanks for sharing your insight and perspective. Now we will look at enabling manufacturers to maximize customer lifetime value with Ashok Kartham. By way of background, Ashok Kartham is the founder and CEO of Mize and creator of the connected customer experience platform that enables companies to maximize customer lifetime value. Today, he will discuss how Mize's connected customer experience platform and smart blocks have helped brands build, launch, and scale subscription model businesses.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. Robbie, thank you for an excellent presentation about building a forever transaction with every customer. The message is very relevant to every company, including manufacturers of durable goods. Mize has a forever promise too, which is to provide a technology platform that enables durable goods manufacturers to maximize their customer lifetime value, the gold metric that you talked about. Today, I want to talk about three key capabilities that help manufacturers to transform from a product-centric model to a customer-centric model to drive customer loyalty and predictable revenue streams. One, building a direct and ongoing engagement with every customer. Most manufacturers may not even know who their end customers are, as it is sold through a different channel partners. I think having a customer portal app that connects with the customers and delivers all services from onboarding to support service and during the usage is critical to maintain that ongoing relationship, which can facilitate subscription revenues. Next, there are a number of interactions that take place during this customer lifecycle or product lifecycle. Today, a lot of them are very fragmented. There are a number of applications. So one of the things that platform enables is that you can, over time, incrementally add value, bring all these interconnected service interactions together. So one scenario that we have here is, as you all know, as the products get connected, there are sensors that send the data. The data can be utilized to determine what the issue is and what the resolution is, and then the right parts and service and technician can be dispatched. Knowledge can be delivered to the technician to fix the product quickly, and then any payments related to it can be managed through under a warranty, service contract, or a subscription plan, whatever the plan that customer is under, while keeping the customer fully informed during this whole service experience. The subscription model, technology is not just about billing or managing that subscription pricing. For manufacturers, it involves connecting different stakeholders from end customers, channel partners, to internal service teams, as well as the service supply chain. It involves connecting to the product and the data and the app, which are typically in the silos before. So all of these need to come together to deliver these new services. So one of the way that connected that I think that most of them are leveraging is through IoT, which enables you to connect to the product and deliver like a predictive maintenance type of services. Then the third aspect is how can you generate revenue from this existing install base? One of the biggest advantages the manufacturers have is they have a large install base and existing trusted relationships and also a tremendous amount of knowledge about these products. Those all can be leveraged to provide various services that can generate revenue, as it could be service plans, maintenance, or subscriptions. Again, in the interest of time, I'll go through quickly three examples. One, Blue Star, which is a leading air conditioning and a commercial refrigeration manufacturer in India, is using their annual maintenance contract plan to generate predictable revenue. The platform is automatically scheduling hundreds of thousands of these maintenance jobs for technicians to go in and deliver it proactively. And then they continue to add value to this contract so they can keep the promise of product uptime. Next, you could take your knowledge assets, be able to monetize it. In this example, Electrolux is taking their service knowledge that they have, which is provided to their authorized service providers, is offered to the independent providers on a subscription basis. So one, it allows them to provide the service the customers are expecting. At the same time, take some of the knowledge that they have, package into a subscription model. And in addition to these digital assets, another example is like parts are required for every service. the distributor Encompass, which provides parts in the appliance and the HVAC industry space, they are providing a subscription service for the field service technicians to track their inventory in their truck. So there is a better visibility on what parts are being used, but also these repairs can be performed first time in a correct way. So all of this data, either from the connected products, the connected customer through the portal, and some of the services that you are delivering on the inventory tracking and all that, provide valuable data that can be utilized to improve the customer service, improve the value that you can provide, find what are the items that you can further monetize going forward. So there are actionable insights that you can derive from all of this data, so the platform can provide the insights that you need. Then, so in summary, I want to take as a platform that enables manufacturers connect to the customers, leverage the connected products and the experience to build that ongoing relationship with the customer, and then start monetizing from the existing install base. So there is a revenue stream, there is a profit stream that helps you to be able to continue to build on the subscription model that Robbie talked about. Again, thank you for joining the webinar. Happy to answer any questions, as I know we are running out of time here. Michael, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ashok. We have time for about 2 more questions. And by the way, if we don't cover your answers to your questions on this webinar, we'll be happy to respond by email to your questions. For the question is actually for both Robbie and for Ashok. What are the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs, as well as intrapreneurs, entrepreneurial spirited people that work for somebody else, face in launching a subscription-based business? Robbie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that if you're an intrapreneur working in a larger organization, I think it's hard to get the air cover and the resources, money, people, and time to prove out the model, because it's the kind of model that is usually quite iterative to get it right. And so it takes a little time. I think if you're doing it alone, figuring out that product market fit can be challenging, and you really want to optimize that before you really invest in marketing.
I mean, one of the challenges is, especially, I know, talking from a manufacturer perspective, most of the time their approach is more product centric, right? Used to selling the products through the current channels, not as much focus on delivering the service or having a direct customer interaction. So internally, they need to fight against that perspective to deliver like a customer-centric service model. So I think once you get that support, and again, as Robbie and everyone talked about, that approach is changing fast. Companies are realizing there are a lot of opportunities. And then how do you enable so you can incrementally prove the value, prove that this model works, there are revenues being generated, and then you can continue to build it so it becomes over time that product as a service model, but it needs to be built, like have a roadmap to build step by step.
Okay. Thanks, Ashok. Ashok, are you aware of any manufacturers or dealers or distributors that are using a minimum period to cover high fixed costs?
Sure. I know a lot of the manufacturers typically have an annual model, which is kind of standardized in the software to the manufacturers too. As far as the fixed cost that's involved in setting up all the infrastructure required for subscriptions, as we know, it is a different financial model compared to the product selling. So there need to be a lot of support in kind of how that can be introduced. As we talked about, there may be a premium model that you are starting with. With all of that, typically on I think, again, you can share some more stats. I think it seems to be generally it's an annual renewable recurring type of a model is what we see most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Chuck. Yeah, most of these models for manufacturing and any time when there are real variable costs that the company incurs to get a new customer, a new member up and running, they either have some kind of an activation fee or they require a minimum initial membership of a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on what kind of investment is required and what kind of if it's a hardware and software solution, what kind of hardware is required. That can often end up requiring 2-3 years of commitment at the beginning.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the audience and the presenters for going a little overtime now. This is all the time we have for questions today. We will follow up after the webinar with any remaining questions that we didn't answer. But before we leave, I want to tell you about an upcoming event and also when you can expect to receive the Kindle version of Robbie's book. First of all, I hope you can join us for our May webinar on benchmarks to optimize and maximize service contract sales. I think this is a nice follow-up to Robbie's webinar. And also, please take our survey, the benchmark survey, and receive a copy of our report findings. We'll cover them at a high level in our webinar, but also if you take the survey, first of all, you'll know that you're included in the information we present in the webinar, but you'll also get a report from us that goes into a little bit more detail. So I want to thank our presenters today, and I hope all our attendees found the webinar informative and useful as you study the service offerings at your company. As a registered attendee, you'll receive the link to the Kindle version of the book by Robbie, Kellman, Baxter, titled The Forever Transaction. You will receive this link by email within a few days. You will also receive an email with the link to this recording and the presentation. Thank you all for attending. That concludes our webinar for today.